letting off some steam, hitting your sister-in-law with a bowling pin, and me watching all 10 episodes in a day so I can hang out with my friends this weekend.
Who? You don't have friends.
After 7 years and 5 seasons, the fate of our favorite gaslighter has finally been revealed. But the question is, did Joe get the ending he deserved? And did we? In this video, we'll be taking a deep dive into the ending and how it ties all 5 seasons together. I'll even be going into how I would have written the ending to give Joe an even worse fate. Now grab your stocking hat and help out the channel by liking and subscribing. And speaking of helping the channel out, a huge shout out to today's sponsor, Storyblocks. I just started using Storyblocks, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this is going to change the way I do videos. A lot of the time I'll be searching for the perfect B-roll for my videos, but the show I'm covering doesn't have it. This is where Storyblocks comes in. They have literally thousands of high quality 4K videos, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. See what I did there? I could literally type in iceberg and boom, over 2,000 results. With unlimited downloads that are royalty free, you don't have to worry about those pesky copyright claims. And it's not just amazing videos. Storyblocks has all sorts of templates, music, sound effects, images, and more. And in a world that's slowly being taken over by our AI overlords, Storyblocks prides itself on content that is created by real artists and not a GPU farm in Nebraska. Plus, their library is frequently updated, so you're not stuck using the same old footage. This is my first sponsor ever, so if you not only want to elevate your own videos and projects, but help support me and the channel, do head on over to storyblocks.com/thinkstory. U's final season begins 3 years after the events of Season 4. Joe Goldberg is no longer a man on the run. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Now the husband of one of the world's wealthiest CEOs, Kate Lockwood, who you may remember as the main love interest in Season 4, Joe is regularly in the limelight, often referred to as Prince Charming. Kate's vast wealth and resources allow Joe to return to a normal life. For example, anything about his past was completely scrubbed from the internet. It's a damning portrayal of how money can be used to buy one's freedom and even manipulate the public's perception of you, because at the end of the day,
the world loves a good love story.
During these 3 years, Joe lives a relatively peaceful life, attending galas, fundraisers, and spending much needed time with his son Henry, who you may remember he abandoned in Season 3's Madre Linda. It's actually abandonment and its connection with love that forms the very root of Joe's psychopathy. As a child, Joe's violent father and neglectful, emotionally unstable mother led him to associate love with pain and instability. The killing of his father and emotional and physical abuse by Mr. Mooney showed him that violence is a successful means of control. So combine his fear of abandonment and belief in violence and you get Joe's psychological blueprint. His fear of abandonment is so great that he obsesses over his lovers. He has to constantly know whether they're cheating on him, which is why we see him stealing their phones, breaking into their apartments, and even stalking them. Joe has to be in control, and when he's not, well, that's when things get messy. So when Joe uncovers that Kate's Uncle Bill plans on stabbing her in the back and unseating her as CEO, Joe shifts into protect mode and has to kill Bill. But it's not this murder that leads to the eventual crumbling of Joe and Kate's relationship. It's the fact he will stop at nothing to protect those he loves, even if it means killing his wife's sister.
You want us to kill everyone who becomes suspicious of us for the rest of our lives.
It's really like this scene in Terminator.
You just can't go around killing people.
Why?
What do you mean why? 'Cause you can't.
Why?
So Kate becomes suspicious of Joe, and Joe becomes suspicious of Kate. And if you've seen the previous seasons, you'll know where this is headed. Combine this with a new love interest for Joe, and you get a recipe for disaster. Meet Bronte, a seemingly homeless book aficionado who's quick to win over Joe's heart with her passion for writing and damsel-in-distress demeanor. We know Joe has this drive to protect those he loves, so what better person to make a love interest than someone who's being harassed by an ex-boyfriend with nowhere to stay? Bronte, as well as her real name, Louise Flannery, are all named after famous female authors. Emily Bronte wrote Wuthering Heights, which tells of a passionate and destructive love affair between Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff, told from the perspective of a man named, get this, Lockwood. But Bronte is hiding a secret. In episode 6, an episode devoted entirely to her backstory, we learn she used to be one of Guinevere Beck's students. Yes, that Guinevere Beck, Joe's love interest from season 1. There was something about Beck's murder that compelled her to seek the truth. One of these being that parts of Beck's book, The Dark Face of Love, seemed like they weren't written by her. Online, she found a group of fellow truth seekers, including Clayton, the son of Dr. Nikki Angevine, the man Joe framed for the murder of Beck. So Bronte ends up moving to New York with the goal of taking down Joe, but things go awry when she develops feelings for him and ultimately believes he's an innocent man, or at least justified in his past actions. In fact, Joe is so good at manipulating Bronte that she ends up believing he was the victim in all of this, saying of Kate,
"She was another person who made you prove your love through killing."
So how does Bronte go from believing Joe to turning on him? The answer lies with Marion Bellamy, the woman Joe pursued while his relationship with Love Quinn burned to the ground. Literally. At the end of season 4, he believed Marion to be dead after she faked her own death, but all of that was a ruse. Marion is living proof of Joe's lies. Meanwhile, Kate, Marion, and Nadia, the woman he framed for the murder of Edward in season 4, trap Joe in the cage below Mooney's, but with the police potentially on their way, Kate says she will kill Joe alone.
I will kill him. Alone.
Little does she know that Joe is one step ahead, having buried a key to the cage in his arm, allowing him to surprise Kate and knock her unconscious. But if things couldn't get any worse, Kate's sister, Maddie, not knowing Kate is down there with Joe, traps him and lights Mooney's on fire. This looks to be the end for Kate and Joe, and in a moment of weakness, Joe admits to his past crimes, including poisoning Love Quinn. But unbeknownst to him, Kate has recorded the whole thing and sent it off to Nadia. It's Bronte, however, who comes back and saves Joe, not because she loves him, but because he wants him to pay for his crimes. She wants answers for the families of his victims. So in the very final episode of the series, Joe and Bronte are on the run, and they're coming for my home country of Canada.
Do not come.
Joe gets some fake passports from Will, who you may remember was once caged by Joe in season 2, and the two decide to make camp at an empty Airbnb. But what about Joe's son, Henry?
Can't disappear until I can talk to Henry. I have to tell him no matter what he hears, I'm not abandoning him.
But that's exactly what he's doing. Joe has become the very person he hates, a parent who has abandoned his child. I've abandoned my child! Throughout the season, Joe's been writing his own Twilight fanfiction, a vampire tale whose protagonist ruthlessly kills those who get in the way of his true love. In his story, the remorseless hero lives happily ever after with his lover. It's all a delusional outlet for him to live out his own deranged fantasies. But as Bronte asks him of his ending,
Do you think that's what your protagonist deserves? It's just usually there's some kind of reckoning, right?
Bronte is Joe's reckoning. She turns his gun on him and asks how he killed Beck. Not only did this man silence Beck's life, but he silenced her voice too by finishing her book. At the end of the episode, we'll see how Bronte used Joe's redacted version to restore Beck's book to its original state. But perhaps the most tragic revelation for Joe is learning that his son thinks he's a monster.
It was you. You're the monster.
Once again, Joe plays the victim.
It's me. I'm unlovable.
But this time, Bronte isn't going to fall for it. Joe lunges for the gun, but Bronte escapes, suffering a bullet wound to the stomach. What ensues is a cat-and-mouse game where Bronte is eventually caught and drowned, only to show up moments later and hold Joe at gunpoint before he's shot in the dick. It's kind of ironic that the man who epitomizes toxic masculinity has his male genitalia ripped from his body. Now I'll briefly go over what happens to all our characters before I get into what I really want to discuss. After 5 seasons, is this the ending we deserve? Did Joe get what was coming to him? The ending features a montage that wraps up what happened to our characters as Elton John's Yellow Brick Road plays. A fitting choice considering it's all about a man disillusioned with fame returning to a simpler life, just like Joe going from his Prince Charming status to life in jail. Nadia, now a free woman, helps other women process their own trauma. Harrison and Maddie are released from prison, even though Maddie technically killed her sister, and she's now expecting twins. Kate survived the fire, but not without suffering severe burns. Burns which Henry will see as a haunting reminder of his father, suggesting that Henry will not turn into the evil monster like his dad. Kate steps down as CEO of Lockwood, which is now 100% non-profit, with her half-brother Teddy taking over as CEO. She returns to her passion of art and champions artists like Marion Bellamy. And after Bronte re-releases Gwen's book, her future remains unclear but optimistic.
I still have no idea who I want to be. but I can't wait to find out.
Then there's Joe. After a messy trial in which his crimes were exposed to the world, he's found guilty of the murders of Guinevere Beck, Love Quinn, Ben Ashby, and Peach Salinger. Dr. Nicky, who was framed for Beck's murder, has his conviction vacated. With New York not having the death penalty, Joe will spend the rest of his life in prison, forced to suffer his worst fate. A life of loneliness. However, the book Joe reads is Norman Mailer's The Executioner's Song, which is a Pulitzer Prize-winning true crime novel about the first person executed in the United States after the reinstatement of the death penalty in 1976, which would suggest that this law is malleable and it's possible Joe one day might share this fate. Even with everything that's happened to him, Joe still believes he's not to blame, rather turning the blame on society for making him who he is, and by extension making us, the viewer, complicit in his crimes. But I had a problem with this ending. I didn't think it went far enough in giving Joe the worst ending possible, especially considering the crimes he's committed throughout all 5 seasons. Now, I don't mean he has to die, that would be too easy. If you really wanted to get back at Joe, you have to hit him where it counts, and to me, there's no better way of doing this than his son, Henry. In my opinion, the worst possible ending for Joe would be if he became responsible, perhaps accidentally, for the death of his own son. He'd then have to live out the rest of his life in jail knowing he killed the very person he was sworn to protect. Just how this would happen would be a topic for another video, but I gotta believe this is a fate worse than what he got. Then there were some other issues with the season I thought needed some work. The twin storyline, in my opinion, was really over the top, even for the show. There's a ton of examples of contrivances, such as Joe putting the key under his skin and Bronte coming back from drowning, as well as missed opportunities like the ability to bring in Joe's adult brother, Jacob. Overall, You has come to an end, and it's a ride I definitely enjoyed taking. But now I turn it over to you. Was the finale of You what you wanted? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, and for more bad takes you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram @ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember,
Daddy loves you very much.